What if I told you that there was a highly accomplished, romantic composer who was the top of their class at the St. Petersburg Conservatory, along with their buddy Tchaikovsky, who was also a prodigious concert pianist who collaborated and corresponded with Liszt, Brahms, Gounod, Thomas? What if I shared that this musician was a prolific composer who wrote 120 songs, chamber works, full operas, all published at major houses like Kant in Leipzig, Zimrock in Berlin, and Gutheil in Moscow, Ricordi in Milan? And what if I said that this person also penned what some consider to be the first significant work of ethnomusicology in Europe? Also, what if I told you that I am nearly positive this person is a complete unknown to most every music scholar in the English-speaking world, except me? If your curiosity has been piqued, then you would be in the same position I found myself in more than 5 years ago when I read a footnote of a footnote regarding a mysterious Russian composer named Schultz-Adaïewsky. While I embarked on many complicated lines of research that led me through half a dozen virtual countries, today you can reap the benefits of my ongoing investigation. Let me now rewind and provide some background on the intriguing topic of this lecture recital, Ella von Schultz-Adaïewsky. When the St. Petersburg Conservatory opened in 1862, Anton Rubinstein ushered in a new era of musical education and professionalism in Russia. Documentation had shown that there were often more women than men studying at the conservatory. While some of these women were attending merely in order to meet the cultural expectations and perhaps find some eligible bachelors, many of the female pupils were legitimately interested in professional musical development. However, there were limited options for a woman who wished to focus on her craft instead of a family who were teaching. Composer and pianist Ella Adaïewsky, born in 1846 and died in 1926, rejected these paths and shaped a highly unorthodox musical life for herself that really deserves our attention. Through a combination of innate talent, extraordinary perseverance, and some luck, Adaïewsky's career took a series of very surprising turns. This presentation will describe her fascinating life, groundbreaking research, noteworthy compositional style, and shows us that she is very much worth our attention today. To understand her exceptional nature, this talk will include a few biographical elements, and thanks to an extensive collection of family letters and diaries which have been painstakingly compiled and summarized by biographer Renata Hüsken, Adaïewsky's life is well known. Here is a picture of the copy of Hüsken's book. There are only a few copies, and it is now out of print. However, Renata is a fantastic scholar, and I got to meet her this summer. She is very generous. I want to thank her. Thank you, Dr. Renata Hüsken, for her extraordinary encouragement and support. She personally shipped me a copy, one of the few copies of her book during the COVID pandemic, when I first tried to read it and translate it, and discussed the fine points of music theory and musicology with me on 2 different continents, in 2 different languages. It's now out of print, but it is still available via interlibrary loan. All right, Ella, here she is, was born in St. Petersburg, and her name was Elizabeth von Schultz. She was born to a Baltic Estonian father and a mother of North German origin. She spoke German at home with her family. She spoke Russian and French outside the home, and eventually learned Italian, Latin, and Greek. She was a slacker. As a piano prodigy, she studied with Adolf Hensel and was encouraged and strictly managed by her momager, Mother Theodora von Schultz. Ella gave extensive concert tours across Western Europe to support her family by the age of 13. Now, this got the attention of the Grand Duchess Helene, who was the aunt of the Tsar of Russia. And the Duchess decided to recruit Ella to her newly founded St. Petersburg Conservatory in order to bolster its reputation, which is the same thing I know that happened with all of my students here. When her mother balked at the anticipated loss of income, she couldn't concertize anymore, she had to stop, go to school, the imperial family offered Ella not only a very large secret scholarship of 250 rubles a month for 5 years, but also promised her father a position in court. Now you may say, Dr. Kalbacker, I don't exactly know the exchange rate of 250 1865 rubles, right? But I went and did the math, don't worry. This roughly equates to $75,000 a year in today's money. She did pretty well. And her mother agreed to these terms. Ella excelled in her courses and began composing, graduating in 1869. In her final exams, she was the first female candidate at the conservatory to receive the best possible grades in all of her exams, a perfect score of 5. Although her scholarship funding was slated to end at this point, Tsar Alexander II and the Prince Alexander of Hesse were both ardent supporters of the young musician. Her scholarship was extended into a secret imperial pension from the Tsar's personal fortune for 3,000 rubles a year. That's more than the director of the conservatory received for his salary. That is the same amount that Tchaikovsky ended up getting, but he got it years later, so she got more money. Ella reported that the secret pension was supposed to last just until she got married, because she was gorgeous and young. However, history chronicles, and I've seen these letters, that the composer actually continued to receive payments, despite, assassinations and world wars, for 50 years. The beautiful and talented Ella von Schultz never married, repeatedly rejecting offers. This source of income, totally unprecedented for a 19th century woman composer, would drastically change the course of her musical life. Feeling understandably indebted to the Tsar and his family for all this support, Ella began composing whatever was requested by the Tsar. And this led to her first public performance of one of her compositions just 1 year after she graduated, in the presence of the Tsar himself. He requested that she compose some liturgical choruses for the imperial choir to sing at the Russian Orthodox Church there. This may be the first time a woman who was both Protestant and German wrote for the Russian Orthodox Church. Church officials found themselves in a very difficult and surprising situation when Ella stood up to receive her applause at the end. You see, she penned this and many of her other works, not under her real name, Ella von Schultz, but under a made-up male Russian name, Adaïewsky. Adaïewsky is a male name because it ends in a Y. It was a woman, it would have been Adaïewskaya. If you go to Wikipedia and you see the listing for Ella Adaïewskaya, shame on them. I have written them. Because that is not a name she ever used, and it is incorrect. It would have totally defeated the purpose of a pen name. But you can see here all of the other names that she used, or other people used for her. These last ones, the Adaïewskaya, people sort of labeled her over the years. She never would have used that. She usually used Adaïewsky, Ella Adaïewsky, Ella von Schultz-Adaïewsky, and sometimes Bertramen. I don't know where that one came from. Well, I do, actually. Her father used the pen name Bertram, and Bertramen is like a feminine version of that. She only used this one when she was writing short stories, which she did in her free time. All right. She came up with this name, by the way, Adaïewsky. It's not a normal Russian name, because, oh, there we go. Because she loved this opera so much, Ruslan and Ludmilla, and in the overture, the kettle drums play A-D-A. She just thought that was cool, so she created a name out of it. All right. Isn't that a beautiful picture of her? Encouraged by her early successes and this passion that allowed her to focus on her work, Adaïewsky composed prolifically. At 27, she completed her first opera, called The Boyar's Daughter, a one-act comic opera in 13 scenes, which she sort of described as a Singspiel. In 1877, she wrote The Dawn of Freedom, but it was rejected by the censors because there was a scene of peasant uprising. You can't have that. This was a controversial subject. Ella's sister Lydia pointed out that even though they were born in St. Petersburg and thought of themselves as fully Russian, many in the city still thought of Ella as a German woman daring to write a Russian folk opera. Despite her tireless efforts, neither The Boyar's Daughter nor The Dawn of Freedom were ever produced on stages. Intrigues, financial hardships, family emergencies, and political censorship prevented the performances, usually just at the last minute, literally when they were in final dress rehearsals. This occurred in St. Petersburg at the Mariinsky, but also in Paris at the Opera Comique, in Vienna at the Komische Oper, and in Budapest at the National Theatre, despite the promotion and collaboration of her good friends like Liszt and Gounod. Adaïewsky was disheartened, but remained unwilling to compromise on her subject matter. This strong woman, who most likely could have surpassed her teachers and had her operas performed if she had only caved to the censors' demands to take out all of that pesky freedom, did not ever give in. Instead, she turned towards smaller scale compositions, piano performance, musicological research, refusing to give up her artistic life. She continued to rebuff marriage proposals, even in her mid-30s. Brahms said to her, ach was, Jugendfrauen müssen heiraten, which means, oh man, come on, young women should get married, roughly. This was ignored. Another family friend said to her, in German, but I'll paraphrase, leave your opera, let opera be and marry, that's a woman's job. She replied, whoa, I have to yawn a little. How often I've heard that. Okay, after a while, she moved with her sister to Venice and took up a really, really full life there. She befriended a baroness, her daughter, Margaret, in this Venetian salon, and eventually, after working in Venice for 20 or 30 years, moved to Bonn in Germany and lived out her days living with a princess in a castle. So, she's pretty fun. She passed in 1926 at the age of 80. There's a great story where it was said in her letters that even in her old age, she would practice piano, she'd practice Bach every morning, and then in the morning she would go out into the forest and take her metronome with her and transcribe a bird song. This was fine until it was World War I, and some folks in Germany saw a Russian woman with a ticking instrument in the forest. They were like, there is a crazy Russian with a bomb. So she had to pull back on that. Her friends had to vouch for her, and she actually switched back to using Schultz for a while. But you know, her letters are full of these amazing stories. Her prolific talent cannot be overlooked. Shortly, we're going to hear some of Adaïewsky's music for voice and piano. Thanks to a generous research, scholarship, and creative activity from Augusta University, I was able to visit the Fata Institute for Historical Research of Eastern Central Europe, yes, that's a thing, for 7 weeks this past summer. And during this residency, I was able to view all 45 folders of her materials, including unpublished music and letters. I will be publishing a website dedicated to Adaïewsky and her music this December in order to disseminate her work further. Currently, there is very, very little English language scholarship regarding her life or her music. Most of her major works, which are in German, are out of print and unavailable. Fortunately, many of the original manuscripts and the out-of-print published copies are available at the Fata Institute or personally held by her biographer, Renata Husken, who lives in Frankfurt in a studio apartment surrounded by boxes and boxes of Adaïewsky music. Our goal is to scan all of that and add it to the Herder collection so that we can all access it. All right, friends, after a short little break, we'll return to hear some of the vocal music of Ella Adaïewsky, including pieces that have never been performed in the U.S. Thank you. We did it. That was great choreography. That was complicated. So complicated. This is the phenomenal Dr. Timothy McReynolds. Please welcome him. Tim and I are longtime collaborators, and we're so lucky that we have somehow both ended up in Georgia. It's wonderful, and we can continue to collaborate. So thank you so much for being here. Today we're going to hear a range, whole range of Adaïewsky's vocal works, beginning with some salon lieder, which she wrote in her early 40s. Lieder are just songs in German. Art songs. What are art songs, you might ask? It's just poetry set to music. It is a fantastic expression of the word in music. In 1899, Simrock published her Vier Lieder, which just means 4 songs, in Berlin, which she dedicated to her mother, and there's a beautiful photo of both of them, that unrelenting advocate and manager of hers, who would have been about 70 years old at the time. She certainly must have been proud of her daughter when the publisher of Mozart, Beethoven, and Schumann took an interest in Ella. We will perform 3 of these selections today. They're highly romantic in nature. The first sets love poetry of Heine. The next speaks with passion about a first kiss. And the last asks the mythical river of forgetfulness, Lethe, to wash away the sorrows of heartbreak.
Schultz-Adaïewsky's own manuscript of this piece. She, I saw them this summer. She wrote 5 or 6 different versions of this, and you could see her reworking and working the piece here. Fantastic stuff. Ella was an avid reader and fascinated by a wide range of histories and cultures. While most of her songs are in German, her native language, she also wrote in Italian, French, Russian, Latin, and Greek. Next, you will hear a piece titled Fata Morgana, which is an Italian term for a desert mirage. The dramatic German poem describes poor pilgrims being drawn to their demise in a desert of illusion. I'm not at all surprised she chose to set the next text. It's a defiant French text of the 14th century feminist writer, yes, that's the music, 1300s, folks, Christine de Pizan. She was a French-Italian writer that wrote in courts, and her pieces are fantastic, her poetry. In that piece, it's called de triste coeur, and it describes a woman having to hide her true feelings from the public eye. nature. I love it. Every time. Ella's largest song collection by far are her 24 preludes for voice and piano, written between 1903 and 1907 in Venice when she was in her late 50s. Adaïewsky's 21-year-old nephew, Benno Geiger, who's the son of her sister Pauline, who's a painter, fun fact, gifted her the poetry for these preludes. He gave her the first poems on her name day, Elizabeth's Day, on November 19th, 1903. Writing to her nephew, she said, "I wake up every day at 6 a.m. to work on them, waking up in the morning with the melodies your words bring, and I go to bed with them as well." She was a wonderful aunt. Adaïewsky refers to the works in her letters using the title Präludien für Klavier mit Gesang, which is telling. She indicates in her letter to her brother that the main characteristic feature is that the voice is interwoven with the accompaniment. It does not form a melody that's floating above it and is only supported by it, but now moves in the midst of it, now below it, like a clarinet in a string quartet. In fact, she divides the styles of the preludes into several categories herself. She loved categorizing things. She calls some of them string quartet-like forms, cantus firmus songs, etude forms, folk songs, and pre-composed works. The preludes are not meant to be performed all at once, but she offers some suggestions for groupings. I've selected 4 that we're going to do today. They're all very, very short. These preludes were not written in chromatic ordering, like Bach and the Well-Tempered Clavier, but rather they follow the order of the circle of fifths, like Chopin's preludes. The first piece, Inschrift, is in C major, and it's only 9 measures long. But it's packed with surprising compositional choices. The prelude begins with an ear-catching melodic jump of a major 7. Thank you. The descending vocal line mirrors the idea of a river flowing into the sea, and that is mentioned in the poetry. And the C major chord is only reached as the very last chord of the piece. Then we'll hear the fourth work called The Desert. She seemed to have some things about the desert. I don't know, she has several pieces that involve deserts. The repeated quarter notes in this piece immediately evoke that image of a sort of monotonous sands. Next, we'll hear number 11, Die Tanne. This piece, although it's very short, has 2 parts, and reflecting the textual shift, and it has a really, really long last vocal phrase that captures the idea of roots growing out from a tree. Finally, we'll hear number 22, which is an Ave Maria. Geiger inserted a Catholic prayer into the secular text, and Adaïewsky uses a repetitive verse device that imitates the sort of repetition of sacred prayer. I really think that these 24 preludes very much capture her inner artistic thought. She wasn't necessarily writing these for someone to perform on stage or in the salon. This is her, some of her most intimate work. So we'll now hear 4 short preludes.
After a sip of water.
Very free. Ich bin so wie die Tanne, stolz und frei. Auf lichter Wiese steht allein mein Baum.
my folks who are fluent in German, they're actually walking out right now. It's okay, I'm going to read this to them, don't worry, I'll translate it. The reception of the 24 preludes was enthusiastic during her lifetime. Many of the preludes were performed in various concerts in Leipzig, Köln, Koblenz. One of the magazines wrote, "These are the most important compositions that we have seen by a lady." It would not occur to anyone that these preludes were composed by a woman if the title page did not reveal it. Everything is manly, firm, and healthy. No swaying or fumbling. The artist creates her very unique structures with a sure hand. I could read on the whole thing, but I won't take the time. One could write a whole book of analyses on these preludes, which will certainly captivate every musician as well as every educated person. We wish these most interesting songs the widest distribution. Several years later, C.F. Kant in Leipzig published her delightful Wiegenlied, nach einem estnischen motiv, or a lullaby on an Estonian theme. They actually published it in 3 different editions. It was quite popular. For violin, for string quartet, Adaïewsky wrote the text and music for the piece herself, and it is particularly touching because it combines the Estonian melodies she would have heard from her father's side of the family, her grandmother, with the North German lyrics, look out for the word muting, that could represent her mother's heritage. In 1904, the next year, Kant also published her spooky Herbstmond, which means fall moon, which uses a compound duple meter in G minor tonality to create an atmosphere reminiscent of a miniature danse macabre. And then finally, we will hear Erwache Friedrich, which she set to a charming poem by the great German writer Lethe in 1920, when she was in her mid-70s. I am going to do something a little different. In the first piece, the Wiegenlied, I am going to sing just the first phrase in Estonian as she would have heard it, because I found a copy this summer where she had written it in herself.
It's right here. It's written in writing.
Yes, it's in that music, which I gave him. It's amazing. She also writes in the French, and of course in the German as well. Fascinating. And I was in the Herder Institute, and I was like, okay, this is a center for Eastern European studies. You don't happen to have like an Estonian person just lurking about? And they were like, ja, natürlich, ja. So I went down the hall, and I was like, hi, Katarina. Could you pronounce this for me? And she did, and we IPA'd it, and now I will know it forever. Let's start off with the Wiegenlied, which translates to cradle song.
wusstest du mit Samen Nacht, dass die Frühling wartet nach in mein Totenreich, in mein Totenreich.
Okay. Perfect. Halloween.
Erwachen, Friedrich, vertreibt die Nacht, die eine deine Nicke zum Tage macht. Die Vögel sind gewiss, der Ruf mein Leben war. Das meine liebe Schwestern Es zieht Morgenschimmel mit blühendem Licht. Herret durch dein Zimmer und weck mich Am Busen deine Schwester, der füllt die Schlaf. Entschloss du immer feste, er ist tot. Die Nacht, die kann nicht schlafen, hast du versäumt. So höre denn zu Strafe, was ich bereut. Steht noch auf meinen Busen des Reiches Jung, die schönste meiner Busen, die schönste meiner Busen, die schönste meiner Busen. Du schläfst ja noch, die schönste meiner Busen. Du schläfst ja noch, du schläfst ja noch, du schläfst ja
I'm sorry I didn't turn the page there. The gist is, hey baby, please wake up. Why are you still sleeping? Finally, the last piece we will hear today, amazingly, has been performed in the United States in the last 100 years, just 1 year before Adaïewsky died. The Horatische Ode, a duet for soprano and baritone, was published in 1918 in Köln, but she wrote it when she was 50. It was programmed by Artur Bodansky, the conductor of many German operas at the Metropolitan Opera, in a Society of the Friends of Music concert in New York in 1925. The soprano part was sung by Marion Telva, and the baritone was Lawrence Tibbett, both top principal singers from the Met. The biographer Huskin chronicles the letter that Bodansky wrote to Adaïewsky in 1925, which tells us that one of her sisters had brought the work to the conductor's attention. This duet is a light-hearted account of two ex-lovers having a dialogue tinged with jealousy, flirtation, and eventual passionate confession, with text taken directly from the book of Odes written by the Roman poet Horace over 2,000 years ago in Latin. Bet you haven't heard that before. This duet beautifully encapsulates Adaïewsky's fascination with ancient music, structure, and rhetoric, while she infuses the piece with her own style of late Romanticism. I know, you're really excited too. Here is one of the manuscripts I found this summer. This is a string quartet version of the duet, which is pretty amazing. And here we have the title page. This folder had over 161 pages of music in it, all different iterations of this piece. And here she is. She's notating that this was written. She was doing this draft in 1896 in Dorpat, and there is her signature there, Ella Schultz-Adaïewsky. In summary, Adaïewsky's rare talents and extraordinary life led her to musical composition that was far ahead of her time. I haven't even mentioned the fact that she wrote a sonata in 1880 with microtones in it. My musicologist friends out there. Her keen musical mind, adaptable personality, and imperial pension enabled her to explore her musical interests to great degrees. The Italian musicologist Quirino Principe describes her as a woman who was a musician of the highest class, a pianist capable of walking with confidence, a dominator of the most difficult instrumental legacy, a composer of rare culture and elegant versatility, and finally a musicologist and ethnomusicologist, probably the only one of her whole kind in the whole history of Europe. Now, thanks to the research of scholars, but especially due to the work of biographer Renata Huskin, Ella Adaïewsky has been redeemed from oblivion. This presentation is just a brief introduction to her life and work and aims to encourage others to expand the English language scholarship related to the many facets of this woman. 100 years ago, she was too far ahead of her time. But now, Adaïewsky's time has finally come. Thank you so much for your attention today. To conclude, we will hear Adaïewsky's Horatische Ode, thanks to my duet partner for life, my husband baritone Jeffrey Grayson Gates. Please do stick around if you have any questions or comments after the presentation. Thanks again. Leader.net, and if you ever use their wonderful, wonderful resources, please consider donating to keep them afloat. We cannot do what we do without a whole team of people. Thank you all so much for coming. Please do come say hello and ask any questions at all. Thank you.